Hey everyone. It's really exciting to be here. I'm Joey, founder of Fei Protocol, and I'm going to be giving you guys a. What was that? Oh, yeah. So I'm going to be giving you guys an overview of algorithmic stablecoins, which have been like in the news a lot, I guess, recently. So the first question that you want to ask is, why are we building more stablecoins? This is the question that Dimitri from 1KX is asking. Okay, guys, stop making new stablecoins. It feels like there's another stablecoin coming out every week. And the question is why? And so I think there's a couple reasons for that. The first one is that stablecoins have diverse value propositions, which is kind of a weird thing to say. Like, what do you mean? They're all just supposed to be stable. And I think that what's important is like what happens, how the stablecoin mechanism is used. For example, a stablecoin like MakerDAO is optimizing for the ability to get leverage against your collateral. And a stablecoin like Fei Protocol is optimizing for liquidity. So when people buy Fei, those assets are supplied to secondary markets to provide robust liquidity for exchanging the stablecoin. And that's why exploring new designs is important, because it's not just about the stable asset, it's about what else you can do with the remainder of the mechanism. The second thing is this idea called the scalability trilemma. There's three things that stablecoins might want to optimize for. One is collateralization, like MakerDAO, like liquidity. And another would be capital efficiency, like USDC, where you can always buy and sell for $1, or even some crazy uncollateralized alternatives that haven't really been successful to date, like empty set dollar or basis. And the third is decentralization. So on the centralized side, you have custodial stablecoins like USDC and Tether. And on the decentralized side, you have stablecoins like DAI, MakerDAO, and liquidity, and Fei, and Frax. So again, it's collateralization, capital efficiency, which are different because it takes $1.50 worth of collateral to make one DAI, whereas with USDC it only takes $1. And then you have decentralization. And it's been said that you can't do all three, and I think there have been a lot of attempts to try and actually achieve this, and that's why people are continuing to design more in the algorithmic space, is because that's how you're going to get all three. And that's what Fei Protocol is trying to do. That's what some other like stable coins in the space. I think we're converging on more novel use cases, and it's all centered around this scalability trilemma. And one of the three that I mentioned was decentralization, and I have it as a third bullet because it's so important. Decentralization is something that it like doesn't matter until it matters, and it's really easy to use USDC and Tether and say, oh, they work, but the regulatory landscape is changing constantly, and the whims of fate or the people with power might go against you. And so decentralization, it's why we're all here. And so building stablecoins that can achieve this while also scaling to meet the massive demand that DeFi can capture, super important. So that's why we're continuing to build new stablecoins. The size. Algorithmic stablecoins are small, less than 5% of the stablecoin markets. The three largest currently are Terra USD, Fei, and Frax. And I think this number is going to keep going up. It'll be, the flippening that I care about is when algorithmic stablecoins pass centralized stablecoins. But also, obviously, I want ETH to pass Bitcoin. So this is not really like a definition of an algorithmic stablecoin, but these are some common characteristics that they have. It's really hard to really pin down exactly what an algorithmic stablecoin is, because you can do so many different things. But these are the properties that I would argue that they have. So first is the mechanism should be fully on-chain. There should be no custodians, except for oracles, which are really hard to do on-chain, because even if you're using some kind of on-chain mechanism to figure out what your asset is pegged to, if that asset mostly lives off-chain, you need an oracle that's off-chain to make that happen. Now, an exception you might consider like Reflexer's Rye, and they're not pegged to a fiat currency, so they don't need an off-chain oracle. But if you are pegged to an off-chain asset, you need an off-chain oracle. Other than that, the whole mechanism should be on-chain. And then you have an algorithmic peg mechanism that helps keep the thing stable. There's a ton of ways to do this, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. The last thing that is important is that there's either no collateral, which I think is personally really risky and unnecessary, or in like the stable coins that are working today all have some amount of collateral, and it could be under collateralized, or it could be, again, we'll talk about some more alternatives. And notice I highlight without liquidations. This is an important asterisk, because if you have liquidations or an over collateralized model, that's something like liquidity or DAI, where you have a vault, you put your collateral in the vault, and you get stablecoins out. I don't consider those algorithmic stablecoins. Some people do, which is why I'm not saying this is a universal definition, but this is how I conceptualize algorithmic stablecoins. And so then the question becomes, how do you manage the risk of this algorithmic stablecoin? Because if you're not maintaining this over collateralization, you need to have a way to transfer the risk of the volatility of your collateral or the risk of the fluctuating demand for your stablecoin. The markets move in waves, and there's trend trading, and it's volatile. So you need to have the natural order is volatility. Your assets are going to be volatile. That's just how it works. And so you're fighting against nature to make an algorithmic stablecoin. And I see three primary mechanisms to absorb this risk or transfer it to a third party. One is to have a volatile supply. One is to have a secondary volatility token. And the third is to use leverage traders or insurance to hedge the volatility of your token. And we're going to talk about each of those three options. The first way to absorb the risk of your algorithmic stablecoin is to have a volatile supply. And this is maybe the most controversial of the three options, because it hasn't really been done like super successfully to date. The first would be rebasing, where you literally just change the balances of everyone who has the token. Some notable examples of this are YAM and Ampleforth. And I would argue that Ampleforth is doing pretty well. It's hard to integrate because everyone's balances are changing, but they are really committed to their vision. They're actually pegged to the 2019 US dollar, which is really cool because they're protected against inflation. And they have a proposal out to list on Aave. And so in general, having a rebasing stablecoin is really hard because, like I said, everyone's balances are changing. But if you're borrowing that token and you immediately sell it for some other asset, you don't really care what's happening to your balances because you don't need it. So having it listed on the lending market is a great idea and pretty cool to see how that works in practice. Coupon-based stablecoins like ESD and Basis Cash, these essentially say, okay, when the demand is high, we're just going to mint new stablecoins, and we're going to give them to this equity shareholder, and that's how the supply is volatile. We're printing more stablecoins. And when the demand is low, we're going to sell future growth at a discount. And these have not worked. In fact, all the on-chain options of this are trading around like 5 or 6 cents right now, so not very stable. And that's because it's really hard when the demand falls to get people to like take on, like every additional person who says, oh, I'm going to buy future growth, eventually no one else is going to buy it. It's like if there's a queue of like 100 million people who are in line to get another dollar, the next guy's not going to come buy it. So they work until they don't, and I actually don't think they've ever worked very well. And I was pretty involved in the empty set dollar community, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And that's when I started thinking about other ways to build an algorithmic stablecoin. And Faye originally used direct incentives as a way to have collateral, but also incentivize the peg. And for similar reasons, this was also challenging because for traders specifically, the price was changing as they would buy and sell. And it makes it hard to know what the true price of the stablecoin is because there's this invisible spread in the market. So if you go to sell and the spot price is 98 cents, but there's a 4% penalty, then the real price is 94 cents. And that makes it hard to make oracles and hard to integrate for similar reasons to rebasing stablecoins. And so Fei protocol actually does not use direct incentives anymore. And I'll talk about what we do use in a second. So the second option is to have a secondary token that absorbs the volatility of your stablecoin. And so this idea is basically that the party that's taking on the risk is like the governance token or some volatility absorbing token that when the demand for the stablecoin goes up, you can purchase one of these tokens for $1. And that means the demand for the governance token is going up, so you're sort of profiting off of the demand for growth in the stablecoin. And then that governance token would be burned from supply. So if you think about it, I want to make another, we'll use Terra for an example, because Terra is a pure, it has no additional collateral in the system. They have their stablecoin, UST, they also have, I think, a Korean won stablecoin, and then they have their governance token, Luna. And so the ticker is Luna and the name is Terra, or vice, yeah, the ticker is Luna and the name is Terra, so I don't actually know which to call it. But the idea is that if you want to buy one UST, you purchase one Luna off of an exchange or on chain, and then you burn it. And that means if the market cap stays constant, the price goes up a tiny bit for everybody. So they're profiting when the system increases in demand. And then to redeem your stablecoin, you sell one of your Terra for a Luna, and that Luna, or one of your UST for a Luna, and that Luna is minted. So it's created and given out. So this is similar to, I don't know if any of you, I'm sure some of you are familiar with, like, if you have a company, you have a certain amount of shares, and when you want to do a fundraising event, you would create new shares, and everyone who has existing shares gets diluted. This is a very similar concept. And this is great because, like, it's kind of like printing money. You're like, hey, we have all these new shares, and now we're going to sell them. The problem is that if you do that forever, people are going to be like, I don't want to hold those shares anymore. They don't have value anymore. And this is the risk of a death spiral. This happened to Titan, the Iron stablecoin, and Titan was the governance token. And they had so many stablecoins in circulation, and they all went to redeem all at once, and they minted so many Titan that the price of Titan went to zero. This is a real risk. And it's something that needs to be controlled for, and that is controlled for based on how you manage the collateral and if you have additional collateral, which is really important because when the no additional collateral is the token in your system, it's very self-referencing. This is not a knock on Terra. I think that Do Kwon and that team does a phenomenal job of managing this risk, and I think UST is one of the most interesting stablecoins out there right now. But this is sort of an existential risk to the model. And so I think models more like Fei and Frax are going to be more prevalent, where under normal circumstances, you're paying either $1 worth of external collateral or maybe partial collateral like with Frax. And the difference here is that you're holding exogenous collateral like Ether or some other stable coins in your reserves that you're using to do the exchange. And then whatever the difference is, that's the part that's minted or burned, like in the case of Terra Luna. But it's mostly backed by additional collateral. In the case of Frax, they hold USDC in their reserves, about 85% right now, and the remaining 15% is covered by this seniorage model, where you're minting and burning the governance token. With Fei, we actually target 100% collateralization. And then if the collateral appreciates, you're over-collateralized. Right now, Fei is over-collateralized because of the ETH run-up that happened in May. And then on the way back down, a lot of the tokens were sold, so we were left over-collateralized. And then if Fei becomes under-collateralized, we do the minting the governance token and selling it. And so in the case of Terra, the governance token is profiting off of demand for the stablecoin, which is sort of self-referential. And similarly in Frax, in the case of Fei, the governance token is profiting off of the collateral itself. So it's more like when ETH does well, Tribe does well, instead of when demand for Fei goes up, Tribe does well. That's sort of the idea behind the secondary volatility token. This is a pretty confusing one, so if you have any questions after, definitely let me know. And the third, which I think is the most interesting, they're all interesting, but this is like where it's sort of a trend, like an evolution of thought with these algorithmic stablecoins. And this idea that, yeah, some people want stability, but other people want volatility. They want the leverage, and I think that that's what's making crypto so volatile. It's very fueled by leverage as an industry. So this idea that risk is actually a product, and so is stability. So maybe you can make a market for these two things. And that's what perpetual futures are. It's literally a market for, oh, I want volatility, or someone else wants to hedge, and then you have the longs and the shorts that are kind of matched off, and if one is in more demand than the other, you get a funding rate that's paid from the side that's in more demand to the side that's in less demand. So this idea of the perfect stablecoin is a stablecoin where it's collateralized by Ether that's then short Ether against some oracle price. So when Ether goes up, your collateral goes up, but your notional value goes down due to the hedge. So you're perfectly settled at $1. And the reason why this doesn't work all the time and why there aren't like a bunch of stable coins like this is that demand for the leverage is fluctuating. So there might be more people who want stability or more people who want leverage. And some of the guys from Angle Finance are in the room, and they're doing a very interesting model that uses perpetual futures at the core and has some other stuff to help meter out this demand problem with the leverage. And I think we're going to see more stablecoin mechanisms that are involved with perpetual futures. We're thinking about some similar stuff with Fei protocol. And it's similar to collateralized stablecoins like DAI and liquidity, where people want that leverage, and they're doing it using an over-collateralized position. Here, you're doing it with the perpetual futures. That's sort of the idea here. So where are we going? Are we going to keep making stablecoins? I think that we're going to see more and more ways to transfer this risk of the algorithmic stablecoin to third parties. So better algorithms, there's innovations happening all the time. Number two is improved stablecoin liquidity. So stablecoin optimized exchanges like Curve, Balancer V2, Uniswap V3, Saddle Finance. These are all places where you can get very low slippage trades on stablecoins. And I think we're going to see more liquidity for stablecoins, more stablecoin optimized AMMs. And these are going to help a lot to bring more stablecoins to market. And the last is better user experience for stablecoin swaps. I'm imagining a world where you go to your favorite DeFi protocol, or even just some like Web3 website that uses DeFi in the back end, and you bring your favorite stablecoin and you take advantage of the improved liquidity to seamlessly convert from the stablecoin you like to hold into the stablecoin that the application you're interfacing with requires, and you don't see it happen. You put in your Fei, you get out, it converts to LUSD in the back end to get into whatever platform you're using, and then when you withdraw, it converts back into the stablecoin that you want. There are some new innovations on Ethereum that allow this, and I think we're going to see products like this as the liquidity improves, as the demand for different long-tail stablecoins improves. And the last thing is, I think there's going to keep being more and more stablecoins. I think there's going to be stablecoins that are specific to different products, that different ecosystems prefer certain stablecoins to other ones, and we're going to see a continued trend of more innovation, more stablecoins, and because of all the liquidity and because of the UX, it's going to be a good thing. It's not going to affect the market, and you're going to have robust sort of liquidity and applications so that we can really try to tackle that scalability trilemma we mentioned in the beginning and make sure we're decentralized. And I'm excited, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. And like I said, I'm Joey from Fei Protocol. You can follow us on Twitter @Fei Protocol. My Twitter handle is Joey __ Santoro, Santoro. And yeah, I'll be here answering questions. Thanks again for listening to this overview of algorithmic stablecoins.
What do you think is in the long-term future of stablecoins, when fiat currencies no longer exist and there's no US dollar to peg against?
Mm-hmm.
What is the most likely, what does a stablecoin look like in that time?
Totally. This is an awesome question. It's a deep philosophical question. Embedded in the question is there's no more USD. I think there's always going to be a USD. Maybe not always, but I think there's going to be USD for a long time, and maybe it won't be as attractive of a place to store value, but it'll always be there because you need to pay your taxes and stuff. But what does a stablecoin look like? Well, you can peg a stablecoin to any Oracle feed or any Oracle price, and that Oracle price could change. It could be based on some kind of bonding curve or some kind of PID controller like what Rye uses. And I think Rye is awesome. It's a really cool project. It's kind of hard to explain, like, wait, it's not pegged to anything. The peg changes, but there's going to be these interesting algorithms. And I think there will be a power law distribution with the non-pegged stablecoins. Like, there's going to be some big winners in those markets because it's really hard to tell everyone, hey, you're going to use this like random unit of exchange that changes sometimes. It's hard to coordinate around that. So I think the narrative is probably going to latch on to one or two of these, and then those are going to be very popular. I think fiat peg stablecoins are always going to be popular because most people live in countries and are down for that. But I think that like the growing demand for like non-pegged stable assets is going to really pick up. And so
I guess the third option there is pegged to commodities.
Or pegged to commodities. I think Sam Kazemian from Frax Finance is working on something called the Frax Price Index, which is basically going to be an idea of true stability, like the consumer price index. And they're going to try to peg a token to that, like Faye is going to be involved, Reflex is going to be involved, maybe Olympus DAO. And yeah, there's going to be these new indices that we're pegging to, like a consumer price index that represent like inflation protected, cost of living, sort of stability. That's a really big idea, and I think it's going to be really important. Thank you. It was a great question.
Hi. So you mentioned that that Faye is not using direct incentives anymore.
Yes.
Is it like fundamentally flawed design, or you will come back to that like with better mathematics behind it in the future?
Totally. I don't think it's fundamentally flawed design, although some of the curves that we used were pretty like I guess strong in the beginning. So it led to, and also like with the launch there was kind of a very high supply but very low demand. So it created kind of this weird perverse incentive. But yeah, I think direct incentives are interesting. I'm not sure if we're going to roll them back out again, but I don't think that they're like off the table. I think putting them on top of Uniswap was probably not the right idea because, like I said, it makes what you see on Uniswap not the truth. And I think that's really, like, I didn't realize how confusing that was going to be because, like, the more people that use your stablecoin, the less they're going to know, like, about direct incentives or anything like that. So you want to make it as simple as possible for your users. So maybe if there are direct incentives, it's going to be more like a dynamic minting and burning fee, which other stablecoins do, like Liquidity has this. We'll probably have this. So it's kind of where you put them to answer your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Totally.
I was wondering what your thought was. Sorry. Yeah, I was wondering what your thought was on makers-like protocols, but collateralized by governance tokens like synthetics. If you have any thought on that.
Is there an example of this that you could point to?
Like synthetics.
Like synthetics.
It's collateralized by SNX. The model is like Maker. They have votes.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar with synthetics. It's interesting. I think they're 600% collateralized for a reason. It's very risky to, again, use your governance token as collateral. And so, like, especially when you have so many price feeds like synthetics has. So it's very capital inefficient. And I think that's why we see synthetics USD has not really even come close to competing with DAI, even though they've been around for about the same time. Those protocols are really cool, and I think they're much more important for like exchanging between price feeds. I don't know that they're going to make the best stablecoins.
You mentioned the flippening as in ETH flipping BTC and becoming #1. Then, in your opinion, what keeps BTC at #2? Does it even stay in the top 10?
Oh yeah, so so I guess when I mentioned that flippening, it was more saying that like to me as a builder in the algorithmic stablecoin space, I care a lot more about algorithmic stablecoins becoming more used than centralized stablecoins. But I think because of decentralized finance, because of the ability to make stablecoins and put them in your applications, Ethereum's going to flip Bitcoin, and I think part of that is because of stablecoins. What's going to keep it there? I'm not totally sure, and I think Bitcoin's awesome for what it's worth. I'm pretty much an Ethereum maxi, but I also like Bitcoin a lot. So I hope that, like I said, there's going to be a ton of stablecoins. There's going to be a ton of blockchains. There's going to be a ton of cryptos, and it's going to be a power law distribution. I think ETH and Bitcoin are clearly the winners for the medium term and hopefully for the long term, but you never know. The industry is crazy, so I'm not sure I could really tell you what's going to. I definitely can't predict the future.
If there are any other questions, we can talk to you during the break.
Sure, yeah, I'll be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it will be.